Yo, somebody must get stepped upon for me to squeeze my corns in these Allen Edmonds. Patent leather with the satin comma bun. James Bond aura, accent from across the pond. Parsimonious, the bread quite frugal. That's what keep the cupboard full. There's chips in my bugle. The coffee spill ridiculous. The peacoat meticulous. A packer on the collar, glow on the pinky and wrist. Davidoff cigar, no smoke in the dubbar. The king with two eagle heads, a palm like I'm Jabbar. Kareem as a Kareem through the city like a dream. The peasants pay me homage like I'm Jesus on the scene. I'm clean, but in the inside I'm dirty. Responsible for taking out a whole country by the age of 30. That was like work, no blood on my shirt. Now at night I can't sleep, cause with Beelzebub I flirt. He pays well, but in the end I get jerked. My woman don't respect me, she's with me for the power. Inhale a block of sour just to pass miserable hours while I medicate my pain locked away in glass towers. Dominant, hierarchy, bourgeoisie, oligarchy. The art of being a failed copy of a carbon copy. Illuminated still lack the light of a commonality. The plot is sloppy, still I press on without the scepter in my... Of course I'm jaded. What you expect when the cost of goods and services is constantly being inflated. Times is fickle, people with the same heritage as Don Rickle want the whole world in a pickle. If you ain't caking, it's probably trickle. Down started when Ronnie Reagan was round. And the round mound of rebound could really bound off the spectrum floor. Meanwhile, I knew drugs in town. Suddenly we go to white from brown. Life in the balance got you busting down. But that was then, what about now? The same song plays, the rhythm just different. When the pressure gets applied, the common man is livid. May create a murder scene in the place he live in. The world's robbing, no one's giving. It's downhill like Tyson with Robin Given. The soul is frigid when its freedom is inhibited. My job claiming work-life balance. While peeking in my window, I need a valance. Try to escape the grasp of the eagle's talons. While the matrix say they love me for my talent. But one wrong step and offbeat breath can leave me bereft of connection to self. The medication I need ain't on the shelf. Life is in the balance. For real. Yeah. Whether triple beam or digital, your way up game at all times is critical. Balancing between the physical and spiritual. Not an easy task, avoidance can be typical. The mystical mind of the sage feels the middle pool. Across the abyss, he steps wearing harrow wool. He uses tools as he walks to the land of Shul. The soul is full, speaks the power of the sacred bull. Sacrifice is the opposite of foolish vice. Time and discipline maketh thou the greatest thrice. Best as possible, keep your mind sharp as knife. Cause overlooking details causes strife. Life in the balance, whether right or wrong, this is the current plight. Prolong, nothing right now, take flight. Yes, home, the sun first rise at night. The swan song. Life in the balance. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. 1 2. Peace to the world. Hopefully you can hear me. Let me see. Let's get. All right. All right. Trying to get my little setup going here. All right. Peace, peace. All right. So let's have a brief discussion here about what's happening in the world and see if we can make some sense of the madness. You know that that word censorship is not cliche. It's a real deal. So I just put that vague title, but we'll go into what we're going to actually break down, which is the war and an odd connection, the war and the new face of health. That was the actual title I was going to give this. But uh, we're going to make sense of the madness by looking at the war through the perspective of the new face of health. I'm going to reference a few things, see if we can get in and get out. And I know this is always, per usual, impromptu, so can always come back and catch this on the replay. All right. First, I'm going to reference an article called Healthcare and the American Medical Profession, 1830 to 1880. Quote, the Civil War years were an important period for the training and professionalism of American physicians. End quote. Why is this significant? Peace Harper. Why is this significant? Because at the start of the Civil War, Neptune made its ingress into Aries. And currently, we have Neptune again at its beginning stages in this transit of Aries. Now, if you just think astrologically, what sign rules over hospitals, insane asylums, places of confinement? That's Pisces. And by modern rulership, Pisces is ruled by Neptune. So in 1862, we are around the time of the Civil War, we start seeing a new approach. Aries is new. Okay. It's a new start. Neptune rules over Pisces, which deals with hospitals and healthcare and, you know, facilities that deal with these things, the sane asylum, all that stuff, right? So you have a new start. All right. So it would make sense then that we would consider that under the current climate, which also ties into a war. See, what the Civil War brought in was triage medicine. How do we attend to things on the battlefield? Peace, Pandora. How do we um, how does medicine look when it's like, oh wow, it's in this type of emergent situation? Okay. Now that is kind of the concept of medicine and its applicability to the current situation, I feel, is kind of sliding under the radar. Okay. But historically, astrologically, we would be wise to see the correlation between the two. The 1830s and 1840s were like a wild west of sorts for the medical world, where penalties for practicing without a medical license were ignored or removed. During this period, states withdrew recognition for medical societies. Unregulated medical marketplace. This created an unregulated medical marketplace that led to competition between orthodox and unorthodox physicians. So, in other words, leading up to the decades prior to the Civil War, there was this uptick in the friction and competition between conventional and non-conventional um, practitioners. We could maybe say, in more modern vernacular, between allopathic and homeopathic. Now, we know that leading up to this present period we're in, there has been an uptick in an interest in more natural and homeopathic and um well, that's the same as natural, but those types of approaches to wellness. How can I be more preventative? How can I eliminate the dependency on pharmaceutical agents? um then of course, we had the medical thing that happened from 2020 to 2022, 23, right? um so basically what they're laying the foundation for here, this co- this thing about the 1830s and 1840s, was what would initiate in 1847, which is the growth of medical schools and the formation of the American Medical Association. 1847. Okay. Now, the American Medical Association was founded around two propositions. One, all doctors should have a suitable education. Two, a uniform, elevated standard of requirements for the degree of MD should be adopted by all medical schools in the US. Okay, that sounds like that's rational, logical, like it makes sense. Like, hey, we need to have um a uniform body of knowledge that people should be attaining when they are given this degree of medical doctor, or this rank of medical doctor. And hey, we should have some type of suitable education. It sounds like it makes sense on the surface. It's very logical. Okay. But we have to look at things from all angles, or as many angles as we can see. So in the early days, they were open, they being the AMA, American Medical Association, they were open about their primary goal. Quote, building a government enforced monopoly for the purpose of dramatically increasing incomes, end quote. Now, what does that really mean? If there's a overarching body that reigns over the ranking or the assignment of the title of doctor, then you can control the money. And if you have the money to provide a higher salary for those who you deem have met your qualifications,
you raise up the whole validity of the profession. So basically, you deify this profession based on the fact that you set up standards. You set the standards of what you're going to learn to be called this, and then when you complete that, you get this reward of this certain salary, which then psychologically plants the seeds that one who has attained this, you know, is at this level in our society. And thus we should look up to this. Okay. So it's a, there's a psychological component here that goes into these efforts. From the Massachusetts Medical Society in 1848. They said that physicians should be looked upon by the mass of mankind with a veneration almost superstitious. That's a quote. Okay, this is coming from the Massachusetts Medical Society, 1848. Now, what we also got to keep in mind, though, while this is going on, that 12 to 20 years later, a man by the name of Frederick T. Gates partnered with John D. Rockefeller would create something called the General Board of Education. And it is very important to know, I don't have the book with me, but I got it in my head. They say verbatim in the beginning of the book on the General Board of Education that they rank it basically that doctors, lawyers, something else, that they were not as high in ranking as philosophers, artists. Let's just use those two because I know those for sure in my memory. That's enough. Artists is enough. So, in other words, the status quo was very clear in that when it came to the hierarchy, that the philosopher and the artist were higher than the physician and the lawyer. But so in other words, they were saying, we're not trying to raise these people up to the lofty heights of being philosophers and artists. We'll make them into doctors and lawyers. Now, see the contradiction? Because when you look at the AMA, their efforts, they were looking to create the idea that the doctor is actually like this superstitious, like, oh my goodness. So do you see the mind thing here? Behind the closed doors, they knew that, you know, the one who really leads your society is the thinker, the visionary, the one who is seeing another future. Okay, the artist, the philosopher, and there were others, but I just can't remember the other titles that they assigned to each rung. But that's again, that's enough to give us perspective here. So by exalting the position of the doctor, you would help to psychologically convince the public that what the doctor says is gospel. Okay. Now, mind you, this is the climate leading up to Neptune's ingress into Aries, which coincided with the Civil War. Okay. Want to point out a two-pronged strategy. One, to use the coercive power of the state to limit the practices of physicians, physician competition. So basically to eliminate the competition. Competition at that time would be homeopaths, pharmacists, midwives, nurses, and later chiropractors. Those were deemed to be the competition. Two, restrict entrance to the profession by restricting the number of approved medical schools in operation and thus the number of students admitted to those approved schools yearly. So you create scarcity. See, because that's you think about people now, like it's like they graduate with they get their undergrad with a degree in biology or physiology or chemistry or whatever, and it's like I'm trying to get into medical school, and it's like congratulations, so and so got accepted into blah 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 medical school, right? So you see it still, that psychological imprint still lasts today of by creating that scarcity, artificial scarcity, it elevated the idea psychologically of the profession. Okay. So remember I said in the early 1900s that Frederick T. Gates, what he said about the physician, its ranking in society, which they admittedly, it's not the highest rung. The philosopher, the artist are above that. But here we have around the same time, 1904, the American Medical Association created its Council on Medical Education. And in 6 years, 35 schools were closed, eliminating competition. So I guess I should have said this at the beginning of the video. This is all just entertainment and education. So this is just basic, just information, just for entertainment. None of this stuff should be taken seriously that I'm talking about. Okay. The work of the American Medical Association has led to the job of physician being one of the few that is recession proof. Did you catch that? The physician, people who are into computer programming and computer information and IT and what are these other the other one, security, while people getting laid off left and right now. Now, earning wise, they can earn comparable income to a physician. But when it comes down to it, when you're talking about a recession proof profession, the computer engineer is not recession proof. The architect is not recession proof. The teacher's not recession proof. I know that's not comparable money wise, but I'm just saying you will be hard pressed to find other professions that are recession proof. The physician, the efforts that were done fortified the physician to this day to where they're recession proof. Continuing with my entertainment, guffaw. 1910, the Flexner Report is published by Albert Flexner, who was a former owner of a bankrupt prep school. Okay. He was not a doctor, but he had this, his report would have a lasting, to this day, effect on health. You might as well say globally. And what's interesting, that there's another guy who always pops up in the news talking about health, who is not a quote unquote doctor. Actually, he's a computer guy. Interesting. History repeats itself. So Flexner's report was used by state medical boards as a basis for closing 25 medical schools in 3 years. Okay. This is what is happening in the early 1900s, first couple of decades. Okay. Now, going back to the Civil War, what we must know, we got to think about what else is going on in the world. This is industrialization. Is This is the throes of the industrial era, right? Here's a here's a book I've referenced in the past, Rollo at Work. And this book is published in, I think, 1837, right? And it's the adventures of a little kid named Rollo. And it's all about Rollo doing manual labor and the type of labor that would be used to support industry. And one of these little stories that really grabs me is about Rollo, a bad beginning. Okay. And it's about, I'll read a little bit. Rollo sat down on the chips and began picking them up all around him and throwing them into his basket. He soon filled it up and then lugged it in, emptied it into the chip bin, and then returned and began to fill it again. He had not got his basket more than half full the second time before he came upon some very large chips, which were so square and flat that he thought they would be good to build houses with. He thought he would just try them a little and began to stand them up in such a manner as to make the four walls of a house. He found, however, an unexpected difficulty. Um, I lost my place. For although the chips were large and square, yet the edges were so sharp that they would not stand up very well. Some time was spent in trying experiments with them in various ways, but he could not succeed very well. So he began to industriously listen to the language. He began again industriously to put them into his bag. So I'm not going to finish all. The whole thing is about they're supposed to be like these moral lessons, but they're all based around this kid doing manual labor. Manual labor that was to support industry. Okay? And this is showing you what the purpose of, you got to think in the US at this time, the whole education system is still in flux. It's developing. You had dame schools, you had I can't think of all the different names, alms schools, not alms schools, those was where the hospitals began, but dame schools, you had philanthropists like what's the dude up in New York? His name was man, I can't think of it. Either way, everything was in flux. You had a guy named Lancaster, Joseph Lancaster, who had gone over to Europe. School system, comes back here and starts this school where you would have 500 students packed into a place at one time, and you create these captains, and the captains watch the other students, and they get rewarded based on the students' performance, and they call that the Lancasterian school. So it was all these experiments about how to train these people and to call it education. And so there was a lot of experimenting and tinkering that led up to Frederick T. Gates, General Board of Education, which coincides with changes in the medical world. Everything's connected. Okay. So Neptune enters Aries in 1861. Made an ingress and moved back into Pisces. It was in Aries for good in 1862, time of the Civil War. So now we transition more into the history of hospitals. 1859, Florence Nightingale established her nursing school at St. Thomas's School in London. Okay. Um, Now, what we need to understand about Nightingale is that she was quoted as saying, quote, wise and humane management of the patient is the best safeguard against infection. The greater part of nursing consists in preserving cleanliness. The specific disease doctrine in the grand refuge of weak, uncultured, unstable minds, such as rule in the medical profession. Let me read that again. The specific disease doctrine is the grand refuge of weak, uncultured, unstable minds, such as now rule in the medical profession. There are no specific diseases. There are specific disease conditions. Now, I want you to understand what she's really saying. She is going up against what we would call germ theory, which comes from Pasteur. And we know he is lauded. We learn about him in biology when we're coming up in school, how important pasteurization is and how it helped, uh, you know, prevent illness and cleanliness, make milk um, to where it's safe to drink. But Pasteur, if you dig into other information, Pasteur might not have been as sharp as we think. And it appears that he had a rival, last name Béchamp, French guy, another French guy, Béchamp, who was a polygen, multiple geniuses, right? Pharmacist, doctor, all types of stuff. And Béchamp was an advocate of the terrain mindset, which is what Nightingale is basically echoing. The terrain says you must first start with making the vessel fortified. Okay. And so if there are things that will weaken the vessel, then it makes it easier for susceptibility to sickness. The germ psychologically, subconsciously is saying that life itself is the problem because we're always trying to attack something or thinking that something's attacking us. And yeah, there are times when you have to directly address something. You know, somebody's got strep, they need something immediately to deal with that. But what happened was the mindset of Pasteur became the overarching to where everything was about attacking germs, right? And you got to think this shift is arising as Neptune, which rules over hospitals, places that deal with sickness, is moving into the sign that represents a new start. For most of the 19th century, only the socially marginal, poor, or isolated received medical care in institutions in the US. When middle or upper class persons fell ill, their families nursed them at home. That's a quote. This also included surgeries, or the same applied for. Okay. By late in the century, this is 19th century, so late 1800s, as society became increasingly industrialized, there's that word again, industrialized and mobile, and as medical practices grew in their sophistication and complexity, the notion that responsible families and caring communities took care of their own became more difficult to apply. And this is where this is very important to understand. When you change the terrain, terrain as in how we're living, and people are having to hustle more to survive, and you're moving them around and life becomes more transient, it is harder to take care of yourself and each other. Naturally, you will become more dependent on someone else because the time and the attention that you could have directed at said things now has to be diverted because industry dictates life. Okay. So, getting back, the result was a gradual shift towards the professionalization of healthcare practices that eventually included the development of a full and competitive commercial market for medical services that increasingly took place in hospitals. End quote. Between 1865 and 1925, in all regions of the US, hospitals transformed into expensive, modern hospitals of science and technology. Now we're going to jump. We're going to jump because you, it may still be seeming like, well, okay, you show how the Civil War, well, you mentioned the Civil War, right? But you still haven't really given us the connection between it and the changes in medicine other than triage medicine. So, so listen to this. 1859, the first oil is successfully drilled. What do people keep talking about this current fiasco? Barrels of oil have gone over $100. And you know, we live in the real world. We go to the gas pump, right? We see prices, no joke. Okay. We got spoiled for a while. Prices are ridiculous. Okay. So around this same time, this is the beauty of astrology. Astrology, sometimes we can study historical things and we never connect something like oil may never get mentioned in the same breath as a Florence Nightingale or as with the Civil War. It's like the Civil War was the South, wanted to keep their slaves, blah, blah, like it's already the way you think about it has already been framed for us so that something that sits right beside it, you may not even consider it because the way we've been conditioned to think has framed how we even look at it. Astrology, though, allows you to pull back and to see that not only does Neptune rule over hospitals, it rules over oil. Ha. Aha. Neptune rules over petroleum. 1859, the first oil is successfully drilled by the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company in Pennsylvania. This drew the attention of John D. Rockefeller, who would go on to develop Standard Oil Company in 1870. Wouldn't this be the same John D. Rockefeller who would partner with Frederick T. Gates to create the General Board of Education? Everything is everything. Now, how petroleum impacts the healthcare industry. That's another article. How petroleum fuels healthcare operations, medical supplies and equipment, transportation and infrastructure, all dependent upon oil. Healthcare and the American medical profession. Going back to that. And then let's see, do I want to go to that and I want to come back to Let me see. Look at my notes here. No, I'm going to jump off for a second because I want to talk about some things about the oil. Okay. Bear with me. I'm looking for something here. Okay. How petroleum fuels healthcare operations. Okay. Medical supplies and equipment. Listen to this. Plastics, IV bags, syringes, surgical tools, prosthetics, and even heart valves rely on petroleum based materials. Pharmaceuticals. Petroleum derived compounds are essential ingredients in medications, including antibiotics, pain relievers, and anesthetics. Medical equipment. High tech devices such as ventilators, MRI machines, and CT scanners contain petroleum based components critical for functionality. Under the helm of transportation and infrastructure, emergency response, ambulances, helicopters, and other emergency vehicles run on gasoline and diesel, ensuring timely and medical response. Supply chain logistics. The transformation of medical supplies and pharmaceuticals depends on trucks, ships, and airplanes, all powered by petroleum. Backup power. Hospitals and clinics rely on diesel powered generators to maintain life saving operations during outages. So, here are just a couple of things that tie in um, oil to industrialized medicine. Okay, we're just connecting some dots, all for the purposes of entertainment. Healthcare and the American medical profession, back to that 1830 to 1880. The Civil War created a new reality for American society, a gradual shift from the previous paradigm where the practitioner visited his patients at home to treat cases of illnesses, and midwives still birth most babies. Civil War changed that. The movement of large bodies of troops led to the greater proliferation of communicable diseases, which caused physician and public alarm. Here's a quote. These changing ideas supported the rapid changing ideas supported the rapid expansion of public health boards, new research projects into the study of infectious diseases, and clinical teaching in the hospital's wards. Germ theory, which we mentioned earlier, researchers would spend the next few decades perfecting experimental methods that would provide unassailable laboratory evidence. The future of healthcare and currency. Okay. We'll come back to that. Now, where I'm going with all of this is that we see that industrialization was fueled by Civil War, or industrialization fueled the Civil War, which then fueled a new change in the practice of health or the whole philosophy of health. You also had to keep in mind that this would lead to something called the Great Migration, where people left from the South and moved north. This is where you get a lot of populations in Chicago who got people from Mississippi and Memphis, people in New York who got people from North Carolina and South Carolina, or people in Georgia, or as far down as Florida, right? Because of the great migration north. So, a few things that we might be able to expect by studying the past through the lens of astrohistology, if I'm gonna make up a term. Um, we already see it. The migration is back south now. Texas got to be the probably the fastest growing state. The migration is back to the south, and people were going north for industry. You're coming south for the new industry. It's not factories anymore. It's data centers. Huge thing in Memphis. They talk about how bad the pollution is in Memphis, right? In Sherman, Texas, they're building a $30 billion Texas Instrument data center. Austin is already pegged. Texas, period, is becoming like the Silicon Third Coast. Okay? You got people of the majority culture who've been protesting in very affluent areas here in this part of North Texas about people of a Hindustani ethnic background coming in and taking over their communities. You know, and so now there's a battle about, oh, they're being racist, and which of course there is a that is always an undertone of that, but we got to think deeper though. There is a takeover going on. I ordered a package from Canva. They delivered, which is, I come to find out, is in Australia. So I'm like, okay, I'll never order. I order business cards, right? Certain other things I won't order from Canva because you can't track them down. You can't call nobody. You can't email. They're in Australia. Wash their hands, but they use UPS as a carrier. UPS loses my package. I call UPS, the corporate, the line. No, nobody who was born in the contiguous US on the other end. You're getting somebody who's ESL, English second language, and you might be talking to somebody over who's off in another country. So when you sit and look at it's already showing, that basically the world that was initiated then has come to an end and a new one is starting, and it's being reversed. The migration is back south. It is not about hard, crude assets, as they say. It's all digital. It's all digital, which we could theorize, or what's the word? Postulate, is that the word? That this will include medicine. You follow the history, you follow the astrology, and how one ushered in a new type of medicine that basically where oil was entangled, we're possibly seeing the end of the focus being on oil, right? And why it was important to have Gulf states involved in this one, right? Why is it important for the conversation of oil to be on the table? But what if we weren't so dependent on it, right? What if there was a better way? Like if we could Hegelian dialectic. I'm at the gym Monday and I see that this pops up on the screen. I think this was CBS. It says the promises and pitfalls of AI in medicine. I'm on the step mill and I'm looking. So I had to go and hurry up and snap a quick picture of that. So it's already been laid out. And then they try to then see this is that thing that we're trying to act like we're presenting both sides so that it's like we're really contemplating this. Oh, some of the potential pitfalls. Here are some of the positives, but here are let's be sober about how we approach this when it's already that's the play. So for the common person, it means we can likely expect big changes that if you are dependent on medications, that you should be mindful of this. Um, you should be mindful, period, even if you're not about this is a time in this little window to really become more educated about prevention, about natural means of fortifying your wellness and responding to issues you may have, about getting things in now as certain things may become more difficult to acquire, linking up with individuals who have acquired skill set in certain areas, and to have a means of putting an end to this Russian roulette about supplements. Because see, here's the thing. Supplements are everywhere. Take this, take that, take this. And then there are 10 million things up like, well, Dr. Sebi said you're supposed to take this and don't eat that. Don't, let me tell you, the secret is you got to start thinking about what works best for you. Okay. Which is why astrology is a great tool for you to assess yourself and to see where you may be predisposed to have certain challenges or weaknesses, what areas are nutrients that your body easily absorbs, processes, right? Um, so that when you are seeing all these things about take this, take then you can go and see, well, what nutrients are in that? What nutrients are in this thing right here? And then by having that, you can then see, okay, by me knowing about this, my looking at my soul map, which is my natal chart, me taking into account transits that happen to that natal chart, right? Then I can see, okay, where I may need certain things, and therefore I can eliminate. There's no way to keep up with all this stuff. It's too much. And you can't afford. There's 10 million people selling 10 million different types of take this, take that, this powder, and the marketing. And so what is most beneficial is to have the knowledge to start determining what I need. And that takes time and discipline, and it takes sometimes investment. Now, with this changing too, it is wise to be ahead of the curve as far as thinking futuristic about health and wellness, because we are we're not moving, we're in a new paradigm already, which is why the work that we have initiated here with the Circle of Life is so timely and important. We have found us a home. At first we were going to run it out of home. I really don't like people coming in and out my house. So um the divine opened up a door to where we found a place to where we can domicile as far as our business um in our fledgling stages. And things like bioresonance therapy as a complementary tool that, okay, you go to your doctor, you've been, given some type of news, and hey, here's another way to have a second look at things and possibly a complement to what you may be doing there. Or if you're a person who just says, hey, I want to get off that hamster wheel. I'm tired of being treated like a lab rat. Take this, take that, take this, take that. Never ask you about how you eat, never ask you about your stress level, never ask you about any emotional entanglements that you may be dealing with, never ask you about your social life, never ask you about your spiritual walk. Just, oh, we found this, take that, take this. Never thinking of it from the standpoint of, hey, what can we do to bring you back in balance under the behests of this? There's a divine intelligence inside of all of us that is already predisposed towards finding homeostasis. And it sends us signals, it sends us messages to say, hey, this, just like your car says, check engine light. We get those little things, but we're not always sure how to hear them, how to see them, and then how to respond to them. So we can put more time into listening to the divine in us, then we have a better chance of giving it the ability to flow and to right itself, thus righting us. So it's definite that the hospital is going to change. You will see hospitals become more digitized. You will see less, unfortunately, you will see less nurses eventually. You're going to see less doctors. And you're going to have the nurses who've always been whatever positive there is of the hospital system. It's always predominantly falling more on the back of the nurse because they're the ones who provide the care. The doctor comes in and diagnose and say, okay, you got this, take this. But the nurse provides that nurturing, suckling at the breast. They are feeding you through care and nursing you back to wellness. So you're going to see more onus being put on their shoulders as the doctors transition, right? To where they're sitting at home talking to you like I'm talking to you right now through and diagnosing you through a camera. Okay. So let me see, did I cover everything I wanted to? What does this mean for? Okay. And if we also factor in the Pluto, oh, peace. Peace, Vic. You say you predicted it. Okay. If you got eyes to see, this is what this This is where we're at. But if we talk about, they called it a health in, they called it e. Oh yeah, e-health. Absolutely, that's right. That's right. E-health. That's right. So, what's the role of Pluto in Aquarius? Aquarius, just in conclusion, is bringing the end to us, placing our hopes, um, and dreams in icons. An icon is not just your celebrity. It's iconography can apply to a politician. It can apply to um, a physician. You know, things that we basically creating Christ figures out of things outside of us. And the Pluto in Aquarius is forcing us to realize the power that lies within us individually and then as a collective, because you can't focus on a collective. If you focus too much on a collective, what you do is you create a quagmire of irresponsibility to where no one ever has to actually do their individual work, because they're always talking about a us. So when I say us, I mean us as a collection of individuals. That is what Aquarius is. Leo is individuality, but Aquarius is individuality as a collective idea. So when we say the people, we know that the people or humanity is a collective of individuals. And that means the power must be restored by each person realizing their inherent power and taking responsibility. So that's what that's what I see with how things are, possibly why things are happening the way they are. And you know, how possibly we can respond. Now, my role is several roles, several hats I'm wearing is one through the lens of astrology and dealing with your psychosomatic, you know, your birth chart is showing you your psychological predispositions. It's giving you a window to your soul. But it also gives you physiological information. Now, I am proficient in both areas, both and together. Additionally, I will be adding to my bundle to where to help you in your own walk from all perspectives, spiritually and physiologically. I'm adding my let me see if I can get it here. I'll be adding this to my site. This is the Intro to Medical or Health Astrology. And this will be available on the site. This is a combination or a coagulation of a lot of information to be put into one place where you can have insight into. Everybody should now be pulling your own chart. You should know how to do it. You can go to Cafe Astrology. They got other places online where you can get you free, pull your birth chart. And if you can't get all of the the exotic points with all the asteroids and things, you can at least see where the planets are, your north node, you know, Chiron, things of that nature. And you should be looking at your chart and you should be studying your chart. And you don't study it, you study it for the rest of your life because it will continue to teach you and talk to you. You should be doing that. And so you take something like this and you use this with your, because it's going to give you basic things like, okay, for one, your moon can represent what you need the most physiologically. So you look at where your moon is. Is that moon debilitated? Where's the ruler of the sign that the moon is in? All these little tips in here. Okay. What does your sun represent? What does your moon represent? Why is Saturn so important to identifying your chart? What do hard aspects from Saturn mean for you? Can it mean physically? What can it mean as far as nutrient absorption? All those types of things in here. One place, okay, where at least get your foot in the game, and you can start doing the rest of the work. So things like that, what I am offering in addition to the circle of life. And remember, with the circle of life, it is bioresonance therapy is the main show, because that is the scanning device. And wherever you are in the world, all you have to do is send a tiniest little fingernail clip. And what I do is, let me get, like, here's mine. Okay. And I put it inside of this little two-sided little tape here. I put it inside of I have a remote box that shines laser through there, and it scans the vessel anywhere, because this is based on quantum entanglement. And so this is a time for us to really up our knowledge with things like, this is a time where you read stuff like Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, and it's not just sexy sapiosexual information. It's applicable. When we got into this stuff like 15 years ago, it was just data. We were just taking stuff in and just learning. But you get to a point where, the data has to become lived. We're in a time now, we don't have time to just get data just to be collecting stuff. The data has to be readily applied. Okay. So if you need help with that, I'm available. That's either through 720astrology.com, through astrological, spiritual guidance, and all, but on the other side, through Circle of Life, circle-of-life.com. And this is the future. This is how we have to think. We have to take a more responsible approach to our total wellness. Outside, inside, head to toe. All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Peace, Pink, Petal Mystic, peace, Chinatown. Peace to everybody. If I miss anybody else, charge it to my head and not my heart. But of course, feel free to hit the like button. I guess it does something. I guess it helps some form of fashion. But yeah. Let me see. There's anything else I needed to? No, that'll cover it for now. I have a lot of things that I've been wanting to get out. Just let me say this too, because if you watch it might have been the Jupiter Direct video. I'm having real time experiences of what I talked about. If you remember, I said with the Jupiter direct in Cancer, that it's a subtle energy and that it's not something that just pops out um immediately. And I said it's an internal. And I said pay attention to March 22nd, if you remember, because with that building, that trine with Jupiter and Mars, and it has literally been that. It's been so much insight that, and then the fact that you think about Mars and Pisces, and it's just, I want to go, but I'm trying to swim through all this water. So it's been a lot, just like these uploads have just been crazy, but then it's been the frustration of I got to get it out, right? So my best friend has been my pens and my notebooks to write things down. And we're slowly climbing our way back from Mercury's double debility, in Pisces and retrograde. Well, at least Mercury is direct now, and but it's still in Pisces. So it's climbing its way back, and Jupiter's direct. So we got that momentum, but it's still that that unfolding is still happening. So continue to pay attention to your intuition, to that gnosis. That gnosis is that inner knowing, that inner intelligence, and that inner GPS. Continue to pay attention to that. With that said, 720astrology.com, circle-of-life.com. Know the stars to know yourself. And as always, stay down till you get up. And when you get up, stay down. Peace.
Minus the mazel tov, the melancholy mask is on. The matrix turns to marathon for those who are masculine, and God forbid if melanin is showing through your epiderm. You considered epidemic, public enemy one. This manuscript is written on the membrane of a Macedon. Prehistoric pantheons will never die, carry on. Caravans of canons, Moabites and Sayons. The oppressors prey on and look for ground to lay on. Then get bit by a lion, Judah, a leon. These words get sprayed on the wall that fate's on. When the ship come, we phase on. The shift is a phaeton. The burden weighed a ton and suddenly is gone. Yeah, it's the subtle things that make your Aki's heart sing. The bellows from the diaphragm where honey's made from bees' wings. The laughter of a child brings some balance to the bloodstream. When war is at your front door, some peace is a welcome thing. It's the subtle things that make your Aki's heart sing. A quiet that drips from full springs from under earth where life clings. Better than ever, the word in every endeavor. Better than clever, the truth is wisdom ever. If you should doubt it and attempt to count it, just know that this is powered by no force, no time devours. No army cowers, no hate can sour. Cause on this hour, the seed flowers. Before the switching of scenes, let's hope that life finds its means. Allegiance to the right team. The murky water's now clean. The darkened path is now seen. The subtle things are now gleaned. The hero conquers the fiend. Balance achieved on the beam. As this discovered in a time capsule in future times. Just know in this era there existed an enlightened mind. He carried water, and within his essence was divine. Seated 3 daughters, and the sun whose brilliant lights would shine. This type of light, let's be honest, is a rare kind. He aged gracefully, not hastily, fine wine. The word is arguably the artistry of the Arcanine. Articulate armory in the arteries is aquanine. Abhorrent to authorities with alliances, the sciences, defiances, the answer to truly finding this. Ein is first, Ein soft second, Ein soft earth. Check it for the record, he is vested, he is tested. Gold a product from the dark, wet, ingested. Mic check it, 1, 2, bipedal. Babes and fetals, prodded with needles, protected nightly by scarab beetles. Not John, Paul, or Ringo, peep the lingo. Awakened souls moving step like the rhythm's equal. Beautiful flowers growing up from fecal. Matters not if not approved by the people. The word.